We're going to cover the compiling the kernel and installing onto a partition. Some of this is automated in the install wizard on the CD, but it won't mount all your drives. So you want to do an install boot on your own to add extra drives. You tell it the partition. It's partition D or the D drive, whatever you want to call it. Anyway, now this is called the configuration manager. What it does is it records your what you type to answer the prompts, and then you can automate it. I use a different technique. I'll show you in a minute. Anyway, well, we might as well record. It records it to. There's a what it's going to do is it's going to in my home directory, there's a config directory, and it's got main is for OS main, master boot is for installing the master boot. These are different applications that have recorded configurations. Anyway, so current is the that's the current answer to all the prompts. Anyway, so we're recording configuration, and let's normally you do C as your base drive, but I use D for an obscure reason. I try to keep my two machines synchronized, and one has a C partition and one the partitions are a little different. So anyway, this is the D partition. That's the starting letter for the partition. So I have I think I have three partitions, so they're going to start at D and then go E and F. And it's a hard drive partition. We're going to probe, so we hit spacebar. And it happens to be number 2. That's for my system. Yours is different. Anyway, now we can either enter a 2 or we can enter 0. You have to put the 0x. We can either enter the base 0. I'm gonna do 2 just for now. Anyway, then we also want to make a RAM disk. You might want to. You got to come up with some use for all your RAM. I have 12 gig. Got nothing better to do than make RAM disks, and it's in blocks, not bytes. That's kind of blocks of 512 bytes. Anyway, T is what I use for the CD-ROM drive. You'll want to add your CD-ROM drive if you went through the normal install off the CD. It only puts your hard drive, so that's one reason you want to run this command. Anyway, the CD-ROM drive, a TAPI that's a CD-ROM. Anyway, so 3. And then we're all done, so we hit enter. Startup account. I made a directory called TAD. That's my start directory. That's my startup account. All the files in the accounts directory are the subdirectories of accounts are startup directories. So user is just a generic user. One will go through a tour. I kind of made bogus accounts on that. You'll see them. They're used for doing different options at booting. Anyway, so we want TAD. Here's what I did. Let me explain better. What I did is I made an account called install, and then when you log in as install. And if you log in as install, then in its startup files, it runs the installation. So I did a little trick to give boot time options. Anyway, so we got TAD and disk cache size. We'll use whatever that is. I think that's, I don't know, 64 meg, something like that. It's all the files take up a total of less than 64 meg, so you don't, unless you're doing something else, you don't need a very big disk cache. Anyway, there it just compiled everything. It compiled all the modules that have binaries. It compiled already, and now it wants to write to the boot partition. So I do 2. Now it's possible the probe won't be correct, and you have to enter the port numbers by hand. Anyway, if you have a system that's got some, I use the Intel chipset to get the port information. If yours is not an Intel chip, the processor is not what I'm talking about, but some of the support chips. Right now, mine it'll only probe for Intel chips, but you can use other chips if you enter in the ports. Anyway, this is a port number, an IO port number, this base 0. Let me do it by hand just to show you. So this is for the boot sector. So don't go with the default unless that's what it is. It probably is not what it is. And 0xb880. And mine, I have 2 hard drives in my system, and this is a slave hard drive. So what we just did is recompiled everything and put installed the partition boot loader, not the master boot loader. Anyway, now that we have it saved once, we should be able to automate it. Install with the configuration manager. So like if you're working on the kernel and you want to recompile it, then you can say, let's use current as our current. We're selecting the current config. Oops, it didn't work. Well, theoretically, what I do is I have I'll tell you what I do. I set up scripts that recompile everything with answers to the prompts. This where I enter my hard drives here, my RAM drives, and then I call InstallBoot after putting some text into the keyboard buffer. Auto puts text into the keyboard buffer. It's like specifying standard in. Anyway, now when I do it, I just go right here, boom, and I compile everything. I also install master boot. I'm not going to do it, but install master boot. I guess I can do it. You enter the drives that you want prompt as options when it boots the computer. If you don't enter, it'll do all of them. Now you enter the base. Wow, it didn't give us a. This don't record. We have to enter that BC00. The probe didn't work on that. That's surprising. Anyway, okay, we just installed to the master boot record. Now, theoretically, we should be able to automate that. Let me try this config thing again. Let's use current config. Okay, there. You see it answered them. Anyway, so maybe it's the probes that present problems or doing the shortcuts. Anyway, so that's all you have to do to install everything. Now there's some things you have to know. there's a directory called boot00. It's got a file that it creates when you install the master boot record. It puts the old master boot record in this directory, and it needs that to chain load whatever was there before you installed. Lose those, and don't lose this file. Like, copy it onto a CD so you have a copy, because like if I format my D partition, I might lose that file and then I'd be in trouble. I think it puts it on the recovery disk. I'm not sure. Anyway, so that's all there is. Let's go see why it. The reason it prompts when you compile is because it has some .exe directives. Here's where it asks for startup account. So when it compiles the kernel, it hits this little block here of code while it's compiling, and basically this shells to the command line and gives the option of streaming code into this spot. So what it does here is it when it finishes those prompts, it actually adds in some code like this right into the stream of code. So anyway, so that's how that works. Now the configuration manager you can use for your own modules to manage stuff. There's a if you're curious where the InstallBoot is, it's in the optional directory boot, and let's just go to now the source drive is the destination drive might be different if you're making a CD-ROM bootable image. Anyway, I was going to show here's where it calls a configuration manager. You can make your own configuration if you want for your own modules, but you don't normally have to do that. You probably won't make static modules. But well, that's it. Let's take a quick peek at. I made some documentation on installation, booting. So the master boot record is block 0 on your hard drive. It loads in a loader that does the menu. It's got a little more that's stored on your Lusos partition, as well as that's where remember where it was the old master boot. Well, there's also the loader on that partition. So if your D partition got destroyed, your master boot record or formatted, then your master boot record wouldn't know where part 2 was. It doesn't use the I think most people use some blocks 0 through 31. Anyway, it doesn't use that. You don't need to worry about it. Anyway, then the master boot record loads the partition boot block, and then that starts up everything. Anyway, that's the sequence during boot. Anyway, I recommend using Grub as your that's the Linux bootloader, and so install master boot. That command affects these two. InstallBoot affects this one right here. So you need that even if you're using Grub. You still run InstallBoot. Okay, well, good luck.